Well, welcome to the interagency briefing on ESPC contracts. We are glad that you're here. We have Tom Hattery on the phone. You there, Tom?
I'm here.
All right. So apparently Tom is the well-dressed man behind the scenes. He doesn't want to share out what he looks like. But there he is. He's right here. He helps with ESPC contracts. You work with the Oak Ridge, right?
Oak Ridge is my employer. I work full-time serving FEMP, the
Gotcha.
DOE Federal Energy Management Program.
Excellent. So also with me for the first time is Gordon Meadows. Say hey, Gordon.
Hey guys.
So welcome here. I'm Dave Lowe. I'm going to be doing double duty. I'm the briefing host as well as talking about Patriot LED because Adam Harmon can't make it today. We want to welcome everybody that signed up today. We have a whole bunch of folks that are here already, and we appreciate all the agencies that are participating. We get a lot of feedback with ESPC contracts because a lot of contracting officers don't know what they are, and I actually had 4 tell me that they were illegal. How you like that, Tom? So we will fix.
That's the type of thing that keeps me employed. So that's
good. Right, and me too, by the way. So there you go. So welcome. We want to welcome everybody here. Quick disclaimer: this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agencies, not DOE or anybody else. It's provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only, and all participation in this briefing is voluntary. And any engagement by you, government people, it's not an indication of or endorsement of or commitment to purchase from any vendor. Right, Tom?
You didn't tell me it wasn't voluntary. I thought it was voluntary. I'll see you later.
All right. Very good. Thanks. And look, real quick on the briefing controls so that we can make this a dialogue that makes it useful for you and for us. If you have any questions, pop open that panel. You'll see the little arrow there. You can open that up and you can text us questions and submit those in the questions panel, as well as you can raise your hand. That's what that little hand is with the arrow on it. You can raise it so we can communicate. If you dialed in, enter your audio pin so that we can unmute you. And also you can email us at support@govbrief.us and we will incorporate you into the conversation, provided that somebody's actually checking that email. If not, we will get back to you as soon as we're done. If you like the way that Gordon looks today in his snazzy CTI shirt, you can make him bigger by dragging that and making it larger, or you can make us disappear altogether if you don't like the way we look. One more thing, just in case, if you're an ESCO and you're looking for the ESPC for ESCO's webinar starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time, you are in the wrong place. Now, I already talked to Tracy and you can't leave, Gordon. Just saying. But if you check your emails, if you got something from Tracy, that you are in the wrong place. But if you are in the right place, then this is what we're going to be talking about today. We'll give some introductions on who is here and why we're here, some initiatives and regulations that are coming down the pike or are already there. As you just heard a moment ago, we have Tom Hattery from FEMP. He's going to review the Federal Energy Management Program and the fact that he is gainfully employed, amazingly enough, with FEMP. ESPC contracts, he'll give you an overview of those, and we'll talk about some of the quick energy wins using LEDs, get you some questions and answers in protecting your agency and procurement options. The other thing that we do here is we ask polls, and the reason why we do polls is to make sure, 1, you're paying attention, and 2, we just want to know where you are. So would you just want to learn more about EPC contracts? Maybe you have a project and you're looking to use ESPC contracts, or you're interested in learning more about LED technology, or you have upcoming requirements for LED lighting, which is kind of the sponsor here, or your boss made you come. Somebody's got to click that one. Somebody's got to do it. So there you go. So click that on there for us so we know how we can approach this. As I mentioned, we do a lot when we talk with contracting officers, and I talk with a lot of contracting officers, and we want to evangelize this effort because it's a way for agencies to be able to get expensive things done without using capital budget. So we're going to give you another 5, 4, 3, 2. You can do it. I promise. It's not painful. And boom, there you go. So here we go, gentlemen. A lot of folks here want to learn more about ESPCs. Some of them have a project and looking to use an ESPC on that contract. Some are interested in LED technology. That's great because that's what Patriot LED does. And A lot of folks, your boss made you come. There you go. Love it. All right. Thanks for that, guys. Well, so Tom Hattery, tell us about what you do. You mentioned that you're full-time with FEMP. Oak Ridge National Labs is your pseudo employer, apparently.
Right, Dave. So, a little background. When ESPC laws were first passed, there was very little done. There were a couple of reasons why. It was extremely difficult to do the procurement. And so when I talk about the program, I'm going to show you how we now do the procurement. And the other thing is that people just didn't know about it. So they hired a number of folks like myself. I'm not a technical person, not an engineer, but I know the program real well. So my job is to go out and help agencies understand the tool, the program, and then if they decide they want to do a project, I help them decide if it's appropriate for their site as well. And if they decide they want to do a project, I'm sort of their account manager throughout the process, bringing whatever services and support and tools that FEMP has to help them do a project. So that's my role. You want me to go down through this slide and explain the others on there too, Dave?
Yeah, there's a couple things. Just, as far as what you do in helping, especially folks from the federal world in contracting, get through the process.
Right. So as I said, I explain how the process works, and then when I use the term account manager, what I mean by that is that while I'm not a gatekeeper, my job is to know all of the types of support. And if there's a project that it's an overseas project and they have an anomaly with escalation rates and they don't know how to go about it because they don't have the normal tools there, we have expertise. I know where in our program in the FEMP bench there are people with expertise that can help a project like that. And so as this slide shows, we have expertise in a number of areas. The national labs, both in terms of technical stuff like PV or ground source heat pumps or that kind of thing, but also there's expertise in things like escalation rates. That's where I would go. But we also have an arm of DOE, our Golden field office, Golden, Colorado, where we have both legal counsel and contracting. So the master contracting officer is there, but his job is not only to maintain the master contract, but also to help agency contracting officers who are doing this for the first time. Our program is really designed to allow contracting officers who have never done one, never been trained in ESPC, to go ahead and do a project, because we'll help them step by step through the process. Which
I cannot thank you enough for you and Doug and Scott being able to help facilitate that, because if they're not familiar with it, they're just not familiar with it, and it will run them down a place. They tend to be a little bit risk averse, maybe just a little bit, right, Tom?
Well, there are things we do in ESPC that if we didn't have an authorizing statute would be illegal, right?
You're absolutely right.
So if Tom Hattery goes and tells a contracting officer, oh, it's okay, you can do this, she might say, yeah, Tom, that sounds good, I'll go ahead and do it. And she might also say, Tom, where's your warrant? Are you going to go to jail if I get this wrong? And so they're much more comfortable sometimes in that type of situation, getting the information from our procurement experts.
Which is, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for being here with us to help with this process. And also with us is Gordon Meadows. He is with CTI. Tell us about CTI, because first of all, thank you for being here. You are the first ESCO that we've had. You are an official ESCO. So welcome aboard here. Tell us about you and how you guys got started and what you guys do.
Sure. So CTI has been working since 2009 to develop ESPC projects for the federal government. We started off working with public housing authorities because there was a huge need for the small housing authorities to get help. So we decided that we would design our business to run lean and mean and get those ESPCs done for small public housing authorities. We decided to enter into the larger federal marketplace through Schedule 84, which is the ESPC Enable program. And we have been successful with doing that. We are currently working on the very first FAA project down at the Corpus Christi, Texas control tower facility. So that has been going great. We're also a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. And because of the Kingdomware decision that had an effect on the VA's contracting ability, We are one of 3 ESCOs that are able to do ESPC projects for the VA. So that has become our main focus. We are currently executing the investment grade audit for the VA Medical Center in Las Vegas, where we are hoping to really break some ground on federal projects utilizing battery storage. So we have some really exciting projects that we're working on. We also have a joint venture with NG, which is one of the largest energy service companies in the world, and they provide us support and bonding capacity to take on larger projects.
Well, good. That's great. And theoretically, you're going to know about the Army Corps ESPC sometime soon, maybe?
So the Army Corps of Engineers was supposed to award us the MATOC for ESPCs in December. That was pushed off until March, and we just found out a couple weeks ago that they are pushing it out to August.
Oh, there you go.
There are some very significant constraints with the contracting officers' availability to review the projects. It's a very large proposal. So we expect to be on the Army Corps of Engineers ESPC MATOC sometime this summer, which will give us the ability to go after all the DOD projects that are contracted through USACE, which is Army and Air Force primarily.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on all that great success that you've had in this environment. I think you have a great viewpoint that we want to get to as well, just from the ESCO standpoint. Real quick about Patriot LED, the folks that are sponsoring this, based in Illinois, it's BAA compliant lighting. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of BAA compliance, because that's important on federal contracts, isn't it, Mr. Meadows?
Sure is.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure you know about. With 5 to 10 year warranty, ultra low flicker, less verified. So they're BAA and TAA compliant. You can check them at patriotled.com. And some of the mandates that have come out over the last few years or even decades, you have the Presidential Proclamation of October 31st dealing with critical infrastructure resilience, and that is the key word now. If you heard of efficiency or green in the past, you take that word out of contracts, put resilience in there, and all of a sudden it works again. So that's part of it. We were at NESCO just a couple weeks ago. We were talking about that. And the executive order back in March of 2017 to improve the efficiency and effectiveness and accountability of federal agencies, EO 13693, talking about sustainability, still in effect, by the way, and that goes all the way back to 1992 with the Energy Policy Acts and the successions thereof. So with BAA compliance, I will say this, the Buy American thing is not new. It started in 1933, dealing with this particular administration driving the manufacturing in the United States, if at all possible, and employing Americans is a very important initiative of this president. And then you have the government efficiency mandates with the executive orders, and there's some more to come with those. But we also see something a little bit different now with the aggressive use of return on investment, which wasn't really something that the government was looking into in that way. They use different terminologies, but now you see a lot more for ROI. And talking about energy management practices, life cycle, payback, cost effectiveness, and ESPC, energy savings performance contracts. So if you're new to that, you'll get a dose of how that works. BAA compliance, real simple, dealing with products that are produced in the United States. Then you have some reinforcement of that back in January 2017, giving a price protection of over TAA of 25% for steel, not necessarily for other products, but they're definitely looking at judicious use of waivers. What we mean by waivers is, can it be made in the United States? If so, the administration wants it to be produced in the United States. So that's kind of the overview of what we're talking about from the regulations. Now, so the question is, this is an easy one, so everybody can answer this. Have you ever used an ESPC contract? Very simple answer. That's yes or no. Most people can even answer this one. So we appreciate you letting us know. So it looks like, wow, I'm impressed. Almost a third so far. And we'll give you another 5 seconds. Good deal. 4, 3, 2, 1, and Excellent. Thanks. So there you go. 30%. Does that surprise you, Tom?
Not really. I mean, we have ESPCs in all agencies across the federal sector, and been doing them since the 90s. So
that's right. And speaking of that, that brings us to you, my man,
excellent.
the FEMP man. So
Right.
this is FEMP's purpose is to do exactly this. It's dealing with the energy program, and that's what you got developed into, is the FEMP program, to help implement this throughout the country, right?
So FEMP is a really small program within the Department of Energy, and the purpose really is just to help other agencies manage their energy.
That you ought to redo that slide, man. That was spot on.
So you mentioned, we talked about what I do, and you mentioned my colleagues here, and we work closely together. So you don't need to worry too much about this, because if you came to Scott and said, "Hey, I've got a project in Washington D.C.," he would turn you over to me. But this is how we have the regions divided up with our responsibility for projects.
Yep. And so we'll look at what this is it's really financing using savings on energy projects, right? Or projects that incorporate energy, right?
Right.
So there's 4 different flavors. What are these flavors, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences.
Right. So the 3 of them, going counterclockwise from the green one, are all ESPCs. They have to all be done under the ESPC authorizing statute. They have to meet all the rules of it. But the first one there, Energy Savings Performance Contracts, is the standard program that's been there forever. The ESPC Enable was something in the last few years we've developed to try to capture smaller projects that the standard program is just a little bit too administrative heavy for, and so we're trying to really streamline things with that Enable process. The ESA is a power purchase agreement, but we're not allowed to call it a power purchase agreement when we put it inside an ESPC. So it's a power purchase agreement inside an ESPC, and it can be done either as a single energy conservation measure, the power purchase agreement, or it can be combined with a whole comprehensive project of doing energy conservation measures. Sometimes that works really well, because if you're going to put in a big solar array to provide generation for a campus, if you reduce the load as you're at the same time you're building a generator, that's a good thing. The UESC utility energy service contracts are very similar. It's the same economic scheme as an ESPC, but it's under a totally different statute. They're performed by utilities who almost always hire an ESCO to do the actual work, but the contract is between the utility and the government, and we'll get into some of the differences later.
Okay. So did you do ESPC Enable and I was just not paying attention?
Yes, I did.
Okay, sorry. But now I'm paying attention. All right. I was looking at people's questions and hands raised, so we will get to your questions in just a minute. So
what is an ESPC? Basically, we bring in a third party, a company. They come in and they find opportunities for avoided cost. And then they give us a contract with a guarantee of that avoided cost. So for example, if your utility bill is $1 million and the company comes in and says, we can find you 20% savings. And they then use their money to construct the project. We don't pay them a dime until it's constructed. And then once it's constructed, we pay them back out of those savings on a periodic basis. It can be monthly, quarterly. They're almost always annually, but can be different depending on an agency's needs. If, for example, and the guarantee works this way, if, for example, you have $1 million utility bill, we're going to give you 20% savings. You check the project at the year end, and you find out, hey, I'm supposed to only have $800,000 because I'm supposed to have $200,000 of savings. So my utility bill and O&M cost should be $800,000, and you find it's not quite working right, and you're paying $900,000. Well, the government's going to pay the contractor, the ESCO, $100,000 instead of $200,000. The ESCO is still going to have to make those debt service payments.
That's
maybe close to the 200,000.
That's a great, and we'll show a slide in a few minutes about where that money kind of falls in,
right.
Was already done. So, but I didn't realize that that's how the payments work. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yep. And that's
so,
that we're going to get into UESCs later, but that's a core difference because UESCs usually do not have a guarantee. They're not by law required. That guarantee portion is required by law in an ESPC.
And that is one of the key differences.
Right.
And what happens is there's a request, an ESCO, then you have a proposal from the ESCO, and then that monitoring and proof of that happens. So tell us about what kind of infrastructure we're talking about here and how this works.
Well, this slide really is to talk about some of the benefits that you get. You know, it's not just that we get somebody else providing the resources to do a project for us, that we can do a project where we don't have appropriations. So I don't need to go through every one of these bullets, but there are just a whole lot of additional benefits from having a partner that can improve your facility, improve your mission, improve the comfort and morale of your employees, make it easier to maintain the facilities because you have new equipment, and maybe part of your contract is for the ESCO to provide some of the maintenance. By the way, when I use the term ESCO, that's our term for a contractor, energy services company.
Which is ESCO. Gordon, by the way.
That's right. That's right.
I could actually chime in on this too. I think one of the great benefits of having an ESCO come in during an ESPC is we're able to look at a facility on a holistic and long-term level, which you don't often get to do as an energy manager at a facility. Because we're able to leverage 25 years worth of financing, we can go after really long-term infrastructure projects. And we don't have to worry about budgetary constraints. As long as the project pays for itself on a whole, then we're able to tackle really challenging issues. I can give a really extreme example. We had a public housing authority where we replaced the elevator. The savings was based on the light bulb in the elevator. It was a 200-year payback, but the elevator was broken and needed to be replaced. There were energy savings related to that project, and we had so much savings from water measures and gas measures that we were able to take the money that they were saving from the water and gas measures and put it towards replacing that elevator. So we're able to tackle really important critical infrastructure projects as long as the project on a whole pays for itself and the agency wants the measures done.
That's a great example, and this is really the slide that says exactly how these work. So before anything happens, you have X amount of spend. You mentioned this. Let's use the $1 million example. You're spending $1 million on energy, and then you can take those. Take us through this slide, Tom. This is fantastic.
So this is sort of our core slide explaining the how the financials of these projects work, and we use the term reallocate because so often a agency person who's brand new to the concept says, "Ooh, energy savings. Oh man, I'm going to have some extra money to do some cool stuff with at the end of the year." And the fact is, you probably will, but that's not the way. That's not the goal of the program. The goal of the program was really a revenue neutral approach to getting these things done. So the first bar shows your budget today for energy and O&M. The second bar shows after you've done a project. And shows your energy O&M has been reduced by the project. The upper grayish or whatever and the green sections are the savings. Now, almost all projects have some excess savings because we approach them conservatively, and the ESCOs do as well. In my little example of, it's supposed to save 20%, and our debt service is going to be $200,000, and we're going to get paid $200,000. Well, we want to be very careful that we don't end up at the end of the year with $190,000 of savings and we got a permanent imbalance on our books for the next 20 years, right? So they usually, depending on for lighting might be 98%, PV might be 80%, and other types of technologies in between. So the excess savings, it's kind of interesting. That little excess savings at the top has ranged between 3 and 6% in our across our portfolio over the years. And what I find interesting, about half of it is underestimation of utility escalation, and about half of it is underestimation of the performance of the equipment that's installed. And the last bar is, after everything's paid off, then all of the savings accrue to the agency.
Which is a beautiful thing. So we look at, you mentioned this before, Gordon, these are some of the areas where you've seen, and you can get real creative in being able to take those savings, bundle them. Bundling is good. That's what Scott would always say. Scott Wolf, your counterpart on the West Coast, he would always say, bundling is good. Bundle as much as you can so you can leverage the savings across places that the bulb in the elevator ain't going to do it in 25 years, right? But if you bundle it with the other components, then you get yourself a new elevator.
Yeah,
right.
We often find that those water measures that we do have a 1.5 year payback, which means that when you're borrowing money for 20 years, those toilets can pay for themselves 10 times, and that 9 times that they pay for themselves out of the 10, they can be paying for other things to get done. So it really is important that you create a bundle and that you work with your ESCO to figure out what your goals are overall and what the most important things are, so that when you are looking at your cost summary sheet, you can work together to balance out that ultimate payback with the measures that are the most important. It's also really important for the agencies to be flexible in this position too, because the numbers don't always work out the way that you want them to in the beginning, and you really want to take the best pile of measures ultimately that pays for itself. And the ESCO will never lead you down a road where you won't get the payback, because we end up saddled with the bill if that happens. So in our own self-interest, we don't propose anything that's particularly risky. That's why Tom was saying the projects typically do overperform, both from escalation rate and overperforming ECMs.
Yeah, just like all the rest of the contracts in the federal government that are overperformers, right, guys? Great. Crickets.
Let me add to the conversation, since we're talking about bundling. Not only so this slide is directly out of the IDIQ contract and lists these, but also has a last category says other. So you're not restricted to these. But apropos of the discussion of bundling, so kind of the typical things that we see. A boiler might have a 30-year simple payback, so it's not going to fit in a 25-year financed. Windows 40 years. Roofs 50 years. So these are the kinds of things that we see that agencies need, because they have to replace them anyway, right? And so you can put them in a project, help fund them with some of those fast payback items. But I want to also add that the statute was changed to make it explicit that you could add appropriations. So let's say you had $1 million to replace your roof, but that's not enough money to replace your roof. It might be a $2 million roof job. And so and maybe the savings of the other ECMs aren't enough to make it all cash flow within an ESPC all by itself. But if you add that $1 million you have appropriations into the project, into a bundled project, you can often bring the payback period down into the 25-year limit.
And that's like a combination of capital plus the ESPC, right?
That's right.
And that's another beautiful thing, what I love about this is the creativity that happens to get to the places where you want to go to leverage at least some of that savings or all of the savings to be able to pay for it. We're not going to spend a whole lot here, but just go over there's multiple ways of the financing, but this will give you an idea of what the ESPCs are and against UESCs, et cetera. So anything you want to comment on this real quick?
So the standard ESPC projects you'll see on the next slide are like, if it's about $1 million, $2 million minimum is where you want to use the standard. The ESPC Enable was designed to do much smaller projects than that. That's why we went to Schedule 84, which was one of the slimmed down provisions. It's a much easier contracting process. There are a number of other steps that are slimmed down in the process to allow you to, there's no limit to the size. You could do a bazillion-dollar enable project, but it is designed to do smaller projects. The ESA, I talked about a little bit, but it's particularly designed to try to get PV. It could be others as well, but PV projects. Civilian, this is not important to DOD, but they have a 30-year authority. But civilian agencies only have a 10-year authority to do a PPA, a power purchase agreement. So this captures the 25-year authority of ESPC by putting your power purchase agreement, now called an ESA, Energy Services Agreement, inside an ESPC. And the UESCs, we talked about a little bit. I will add one other important component, which is that they can only be done in a utilities service territory, which is important, particularly if you're a large agency looking to do a comprehensive project over a large geographic region. You have to look at that situation and say, hey, this utility only serves these 3 buildings. It doesn't serve the other 5 buildings. And if I want to get all 8 buildings in one project, so I can, do that bundling we were just talking about across buildings as well as across ECMs, then I've got to use an ESPC as opposed to a UESC. I also should say UESCs are good for very small projects as well. Sometimes the utilities have a relationship with their customers, and they'll do a $50,000 switchgear upgrade because it helps their cause as well as your cause.
And those are sometimes those are a little bit faster, but the cool thing is you're there as well as your colleagues to help them make the choice. You don't just say, hey, well, which one do you think? It's, hey, let's take a look at what you're trying to accomplish. We'll drive the bus down the right lane, and we'll help you assemble the pieces with ESCO partners to get to where you want to go.
Right.
If I could just chime in a little bit on the ESPC Enable projects, I would suggest to the people who are listening in that ESPC Enable projects shouldn't be thought of as smaller projects dollar-wise, but as simpler projects ECM-wise. The ESPC Enable tool that was developed, I believe, at Oak Ridge, but Tom might know better than me.
That's right.
So they developed the tool, which is really excellent, and we've had a chance to work with it. But you really do want to keep your ESPC Enable projects within the limits of that tool. So lighting, HVAC controls, small amounts of HVAC, motors, and solar PV are really good places to utilize the ESPC Enable tool, because the contracting is set up in a vastly more simplified manner. In fact, anybody who's interested in it can shoot me an email. I have a package set up where I have all of the contracting documents in just a simple file format that any contracting officer can just print out, fill out the basic information, and get it over to Ira Birnbaum at FEMP, who's the Enable coordinator. So that is a really streamlined and easy entry point into the ESPC contracting realm, where if you have, say, a lighting project is perfect. I think one of the most successful Enable projects ever completed was at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, where they did a $7 million base-wide LED lighting upgrade, and they executed the entire project in under a year, which is staggering. It's less than half the time that it takes for an IDIQ ESPC to unfold, because the savings can be just run through this tool that was developed by Oak Ridge, so the engineering is significantly simplified. And from a contracting standpoint, all of the contract documents are pre-written for the contracting agent. So it makes it really a simple process to execute an ESPC.
I will give a slightly different slant on one of the points Gordon made, and that is that we do have the tools for this limited number of ECMs, and that's where it works most efficiently. But I wouldn't necessarily restrict yourself to those. So, I did a project once before we had what's called hybrid, and I'll tell you what that is in just a second. It was a perfect candidate for an Enable project. It was small building, and all of the ECMs, with one exception, fit within these tools. and that was envelope. There was these Enable was not allowed to tackle envelope issues. Well, it didn't make sense to do the project without envelope because you could almost put your hand in between the double doors from the outside to the inside, so you wouldn't have wanted to go in and do an energy efficiency project in that building without tackling some of those envelope issues. So it was a shame not to be able to use Enable for that, and we've changed it what we call hybrid, where you can add additional ECMs to those that have these automatic spreadsheets.
Oh, really? You can do that now?
Yeah, and we're actually doing that at Corpus Christi right now, which is fantastic to have that flexibility. We did add in a few different ECMs that aren't within the tool. One of the coolest was xeriscaping, so we removed all the irrigation and put in desert scaping for them, which was really cool. So gave them all of the irrigation water, and it's really nice to have the flexibility. Of course, my engineers were pulling their hair out trying to do the hybridization, but I'm happy about it.
Awesome. Well, great.
By the way, Dave, since we've mentioned water a couple of times, let me just say real quickly that the statute was changed a number of years ago to allow water, so you don't have to worry about energy component of water. If you've got a water saving measure, that can be included.
Awesome. Fantastic. You still here? Am I still broadcasting here, or am I gone?
I see you.
Okay.
I see you.
I'm trying. Oh, you know what it is? I think I froze my screen to do some things behind the scene. Now, the back. There it is. That's what I was looking for. All right. So we're going to get to some questions momentarily. So get your questions ready. But I got this next poll for you. What is your biggest issue, if you have any, because they should be issue lists, right, Tom? With, that's not what I asked for. That's not the one I want. What is your biggest issue with the facilities upgrade? Okay, sorry, I closed it. You're gonna have to answer that another time because I can't reopen it. Sorry, I read the wrong thing. Well, there you go. Well, that was 100% effective because understanding ESPC contracting was the ones that they asked for here. I'll share the results. In those 3 seconds, that was it. 100%. Apologies for jacking up that. Real quick, I'm going to talk. One of the biggest ways to be able, and you mentioned this, Gordon, and you know this as well, Tom, is the low-hanging. The reason why we're here from Patriot LED is that the low-hanging fruit is the lighting. Even now is still, because in the efficiencies and the lightings, that on the front end, on the savings is lightings. Now on the contracting side, we're the redheaded stepchildren that get forgotten about and included at the end. So the reason why we want everybody to know is, one, that we're BAA compliant and all those types of things. But all in all, as far as the impact on this, it is incredible how fast you get that payback. You mentioned a year and a half for the water. Same kind of turnarounds with a lot of the tubes nowadays and fixtures. A very short turnaround, which is what gives you the ability to bundle and pay for those more expensive things. We see upwards, sometimes even better than 50% reduction of energy usage just by doing your upgrades into LED. And they last a lot longer. And one of the challenges is trying to factor in some of the maintenance savings that you have as far as maintenance costs, lowering those maintenance costs, because they happen in different sides of the fence. They don't always want to throw that information back and forth, I know, but even so, even if you keep that out, there's a lot of maintenance savings along with the actual savings as they last much, much longer. You can do this on single room, just popping out in hybrid fixtures that can run both off a ballast and off a direct wire. You can do it by room, floor, campus, all the way through all of your buildings if you want to. And you can do it in multiple sites, right, Tom? You don't have to just do it in one place. You can bundle these things in sites, can't you?
Yes.
So some of the things with BAA compliance, they make sure you're meeting the new and upcoming federal mandates, driving much, much more to BAA versus TAA, and the security components revolving around that. From the Orient, we'll leave that alone for the moment, but meeting the resilience challenges that are out there, because if you reduce the energy that's in the consumption, I was talking with folks in the Navy Yard the other day about this, you reduce the consumption, then you don't have to have quite as much generating capacity to deal with something if something bad happens, right? So that's the idea. And lighting represents up to 30% of the building operating costs. And even now, it's competitive pricing in comparison. So here we go. When do you expect a facilities upgrade requirement? And I'm not going to screw this one up. So we have, actually, it's already screwed up because we're in Q3 of 2019. So don't pay attention to the first two, except they're both immediate. How about that? So Q3, Q4, not sure. That's where we want to live. If you have something immediately, that's fantastic because that's why we're here. Right, Gordon?
That's right.
So, and we will be getting to your questions. I got a bunch of them already stacked up. So get ready, fellas. They're coming. We'll give you another 5 seconds so we can keep this on. We're supposed to be done a minute ago. Somebody talks a lot. I'm not going to say anything because I'm probably that person. All right, there we go. Here's what we got. Some folks aren't sure, but we have several that are immediate and some that are coming not too distant. So we appreciate that. All right, we're going to get to your questions. Remember, you can open up that panel and we will get to you. I had a hand raised, and let me see. I can see it's Melanie. Melanie, let's see if I can get you unmuted. Melanie, you there? Melanie? She is not there, so we'll mute her. We'll go see if there's anybody else that has any questions. Can we acquire a copy of the presentation? Yes. I actually put it in the handouts. You can go to the right-hand panel and download it there. We'll also send a recap email out. How do you avoid these contracts being considered Anti-Deficiency Act violations, ADA violations? Tom, that's all you, brother.
So 42 U.S.C. 8287 is the statute that gives the legal authority to do ESPCs, and it is explicit on that issue.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we will, since that's a question, we will circulate that afterwards because we don't want to just have Tom rip it out there. We will give you with quotations and direct link locations. How about that?
Right. The statute says you only have to have as much money in your budget as you need for the first year of the contract from when the contract is signed. And given that most projects aren't finished construction within the first year after they're signed, you need $0 in your budget to sign one of these contracts according to that statute.
Perfect. Are non-GSA agencies required to involve GSA in this process? Each project, or is it just Schedule 84 competition? Did you get that? Are non-GSA agencies required? Hang on a second, Greg.
I believe what you would do is engage with Ira Birnbaum, who again is the project manager for Enable, and he can give you all of the directions on how to walk through the process along with all of the contracting documents. I believe that the project is simply issued as a GSA Schedule 84 open for competition. Generally, you don't have to work with the GSA in a significant way, is my understanding.
That's right. So you do a selection like you would, your agency would do any selection of a contractor off of a GSA schedule, whether you're GSA or Department of Commerce.
Excellent. So is it not possible some of these projects could be considered construction and subject to DBA construction wage rate requirements? How is this addressed? Great question. Greg, you're asking really good questions. I have no idea what you're talking about.
They are, you know, it's not clear to anybody whether they're service or construction contracts because they're both. But yes, those construction requirements, Davis-Bacon, et cetera, are required for ESPC projects.
All right, immediately primary. I'm going to get Tricia. Yes, I mean,
I would just say don't worry too much about how much the workers are paid for doing the work. We pay all of the contractors Davis-Bacon wages, which is required by law. It has little to no effect on the payback of the measures ultimately. You have to remember that these projects are budget neutral. It doesn't cost the agency anything to execute an ESPC project. So focusing on the cost of subcontractors kind of misses the point of the fact that the savings are going to pay for those contractors to be there doing the work for you.
I'm not sure that was a cost question as much as a compliance with regulations.
Sure.
And all of those regs are part, they're all in the IDIQ contract by reference, so they all have to be complied with.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Trish is asking a question. Hold on a second. Trish, are you there? Can you speak with a microphone? Maybe. I thought I saw you.
Yes. Can you?
Hey, Trish. Hey, Trisha. So,
Hi.
Trisha, is there a way to capture DBE, SBE percent for these contracts? Are you coming from the vendor side, or are you coming from a contracting side?
Contracting side, King County, Washington.
All right. So you're talking about small business. Ask that question the way you want to ask it instead of me trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So do we capture any type of like small business for the subcontractors that are working on this? It's something that's important to us as an owner to have, equity and social justice with our small business community, and just curious how that works with these contracts.
Are you state or federal?
County.
County. So, I can't answer for county. I can tell you how our IDIQ contract works, and it's a federal program, right? And so the agencies that issue a task order under our IDIQ contract do get credit. Any ESCO doing a project has to have a small business contracting plan as part of their contract with us. And
or maybe be a small business altogether, like Gordon.
It's possible, more likely with Enable than with the standard ESPC. We do have a small business, but won't get into that too much. So far, all of the standard ESPCs there have been no small businesses, but their subcontractors often are, and an agency can count the subcontractor toward its small business goals.
Excellent.
I would say also, if you're looking for contractors who are qualified to do this work, you can run a search for DOE qualified ESCOs, and it will populate the entire DOE list of qualified ESCOs. You can go through that list, and there's a number of small businesses and a few of us that are also service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses.
Yep.
Great
question.
You.
Thanks, Tristan. Thanks so much for joining us. And next up, I'm going to get into, because we ran a little bit over, but I think this is great. Thanks, guys. Just staying out of hot water. Get your technical and procurement people together on the page quick. That always helps no matter what. But engage your FEMP folks like Tom to be able to help you do this, to draft your procurement plan, get things together, figure out how you can bundle big, and use the ESCO as a trusted resource. I am certain that if you call Gordon or any of the other ESCOs, they'll be willing to talk to you about your project, wouldn't you, Gordon?
Yep.
Just a little bit interested in that. And then from there, tell the ESCOs, Gordon, we've already talked about this, driving the BAA compliance for LEDs. We've talked about it. But require UL flickerless verification, because that'll help with headaches and things like that in sensitive areas. Verify the warranties of those bulbs, or replacement for the bulbs, the fixtures and such, and use available ESPC, Enable, and IDIQ, and Army Corps of Engineer MATOX, because they are they're streamlined vehicles. They've already been in place. They found almost all the potholes, I can tell you, because the first ones weren't that easy, were they, Tom?
No, that's right. But Dave, also let me throw out one caution based on something you said about having ESCOs, talking to ESCOs. For the government people on your call, do be careful how you approach that. There's a certain level that we encourage. It's good to call and talk to them, have them come out, explain the program, explain their company. But to go much further than that, for example, if you give them a tour and let them give you a little mini proposal of what they could do, oops, now you're into competition territory where, so my suggestion is for folks that go beyond simple conversations about what is the program and what's your company and how's it work, make sure you have your contracting officer involved if you're like a building manager or something like that. If you're going to go beyond that, get your CO involved.
Great advice. That's really staying out of hot water, and it keeps the ESCO out of hot water. It keeps everybody out of hot water. That's beautiful.
Yes, go out, because they could actually be disqualified to
That's
compete
right.
if they're given a leg up like that, right?
That's exactly right. So here's where you can find it. Enable GSA Schedule 84 SIN 24653 is it, and you can find ESPC 2017 DOE IDIQ holders right on the DOE website. And if you look for FEMP, FEMP, you cannot miss them. They're all over the place out there. So, and you can also, they'll help you even if you're not going to do an ESPC and a UESC is better, they'll tell you, right, Tom?
Yeah, let me also just give another little bit of guidance here. When you look up the ESCOs on our website, there are two lists, and you can get confused, and it looks almost the same. We have the qualified ESCO list, and that Gordon's a member of that, and that's got over 100 ESCOs on it. And then we have what's mentioned on your slide there, the DOE IDIQ list, and that'll be like 20 companies that have been awarded IDIQ contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Totally separate lists, so just don't confuse them when you're looking.
Yep, and we'll give you links to all those and follow up, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. If you want more information on Axis LED/Patriot LED, BAA compliant lighting products inside and outside, anything except the screw-ins is what they say. GSA schedules through partners through distribution. If you have something you have to meet, they'll meet it through partners or in distribution. They also have an interagency agreement with Unicor. So with that, this is the last question that I'm going to ask you, and then I may ask one more question because it looks like we have some. You need help with something, let us know what you need help with. It could be a specific product, looking to whether this is going to work with your organization, an energy audit, spec sheets, price lists from about BAA compliant lighting, or something else. Please contact me and we'll make sure that you get the information that you need. And this is an interchange with everybody that's on this call. So feel free to let us know. And I'm going to give you another 5, 4, you can do it, 3, 2, I promise you can do it. There we go, and that's it. So, so this is what's going to happen later on. Gordon will make sure we get the things that, figuring out if this is going to work for folks. And you, Tom, we'll get you engaged as well when we do follow-ups in this. And speaking of follow-ups, you'll get a copy of the presentation if you didn't download it here. We'll get you a copy of that Q&A. Anything that comes in during this or after, we will make that incorporated into the follow-up, the supporting documents that are necessary. You mentioned a couple of things that I want to get from you, Tom, as far as links, and you mentioned that you had like a whole entire packet, Gordon. If that's okay with you, we can get that to everybody as well. And then capabilities as well as procurement options. And with that, we are late. We apologize, but I tell you, thanks, Tom. It was awesome having you here. Really appreciate your time.
You bet.
And same with you, Gordon.
Thank you.
Glad that you can make it. Love the insight from both of you. Again, I'm Dave Lowe. I'm the briefing host as well as covering for Patriot LED. So thanks for joining us today. If you have any other questions, feel free. You can shoot them directly to us, or you can send them to support@govbrief.us and it will get answered. And let me see if I have one more question or two that we can get to before we let them go. HVAC steam cool cleaning processes have been shut down to have 1 to 2 year paybacks. Some utilities provide rebates for this type of service up to $20 per ton. How does this process get bundled with ESCO? That sounds like a UESC to me, but.
No,
well, you can do a project like that where there are rebates that the ESCO can capture, and the rebates can be used to help finance the project.
There you go. That's why you guys are the experts.
Yeah, the rebates can be very helpful in helping the project paybacks come down to a level where we can bundle in the longer term measures. So those are great, and that ends up paying for the project. So the money really does go back to the customer.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, and thanks again, Gordon and Tom, and we will see you later.